correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. My name is Steve, and I'm here with Steve.
Yes, my name is Steve as well.
Yeah. So, with that, we got a loaded week, but before we get into anything, let's go ahead and talk about our podcast of the week.
Our podcast of the week. Who would our podcast of the week be this week, Steve?
The podcast of the week is Tabletop Tales.
Ooh.
Which you might know as formerly What Comes After. They have fully rebranded at this point to Tabletop Tales, and they are super awesome at that. Love those folks over there.
Yeah, we had Tyler, the GM for the main campaign, on a couple months ago, I think back episode 30, talking a little bit about his world building process and so forth.
Yeah, they're doing live streams now and all kinds of crazy stuff over there. So honestly, go check out Tabletop Tales.
Yeah, they've got, I think, three campaigns going on the feed right now?
Currently, yeah.
Yeah, they have their main one, which is the What Comes After campaign, which is post-apocalyptic Genesis. They have a Star Wars game, and I think they have a 5e campaign as well. The Star Wars and the 5e, I believe, are also streams.
Yes, they do stream Star Wars in 5e, which is really cool. I give them a lot of credit because I don't know, I don't have the strength to start streaming yet.
I don't have the equipment to start streaming yet.
I have the equipment. It's just I don't know that I have the willpower to stream consistently.
Well, I don't want to subject people to looking at my face that much.
Yeah, well, I feel that. But let's get into this week's topic.
I was going to say, before we get into the topic, I did want to bring something up that, as we're recording this, hasn't happened yet, but by the time anyone hears this, will be in effect. And that's the price hikes over on DriveThruRPG for some of the print-on-demand stuff.
Yes, everyone lower your hats in commemoration of lower price stuff. DriveThru has announced that they're going to have to raise the price of their color printings for, 40%?
The last figures I saw was for what has been the premium hardcover option. The prices are going up 45%. And I know everyone's probably screaming and hollering. And I would like to say I've heard this from multiple places, including an interview with the CEO of One Bookshelf. I forget his name, but the guy, One Bookshelf, is the parent company of DriveThruRPG. What has happened is the vendor that they use, the printer who prints these on-demand copies for them, has raised their prices that much. DriveThru is not making any more money off of this. The people who write the books are not making any more money off of this. This is completely a pass on of overhead. And I've also heard, again, from the higher ups at DriveThru, they are actively looking for someone else to partner with for this printing to cut back on this problem. But as of yet, they have not found anything, at least, again, as we record.
Yeah, it's a shame, and that does suck, and that's something that I think it's just part of the world that we live in at this point. I hope they find a new printer soon, because not that, it is the premium version. So, if you're just looking for the base stuff, that's not going to get too affected, but it's a shame anytime prices like that have to go up.
Yeah. Now I have heard, and again, if you're looking at things and not seeing the options you used to, I have heard of some publishers that are suspending the availability of the premium hardcover print on demand because they're simply not willing to charge that for one of their titles.
Yeah, and that's a shame as well, but I don't mean to bring the real world into this, but we have seen, I wonder if this is partly because of we've seen an increase in the cost of wood recently, and if the paper and cardboard and everything that goes into those premium books has gone up, and then that has to get passed along somewhere.
Yeah.
It sucks, but we'll get back to a reasonable price at some point.
Yeah, and really, I just wanted to make people more aware that, look, this isn't drive-through trying to gouge you. It isn't, these smaller publishers trying to gouge you. This is basically, it's drive-through trying to not lose their shirt.
Yeah. And I can respect that, especially drive-through being the staple in the industry that it is. You talk to anybody in the tabletop RPG industry, and there's not a lot of great places to get independent books or stuff like that. And drive-through is a fantastic resource. And with that, not to segue off of bad news, but if you are ordering from drive-through and you're spending a little bit of money on drive-through, please consider using our affiliate link. It is in our show notes every week, and it's there for you guys so that we can, what happens is you guys get books. It gives us a little bit of a kickback, and also helps so that when we go to run those one shots, we can afford to get the books to play the one shots and to do the things with you guys, especially on the Discord or anywhere you guys are interacting with us.
Yeah.
Just consider using that affiliate link. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It just gives us a little bit of a kickback in drive-through credit.
Yeah, that's all that happens. And then now we do get a report. Actually, I get it, but I can look and I can see what's been ordered. I don't know who ordered it, but like, say, I all of a sudden see a whole bunch of sales of mech-related RPG products. That's about what I can see that somebody bought these things. That's all. So, there's no privacy issues, whatever.
And the other thing with that is that, if we see you out there buying mech-related games, we're going to talk about mech-related games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want to talk about what you guys are interested.
Yes. Yeah. So that also gives us a little bit of a barometer as to, what are the people who listen to the show buying? Therefore, maybe what do we want to talk about more?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're interested in a particular topic, and this is a fact of, if you're interested in a particular topic, come on over to our yeah. If you're interested in a particular
come on over to our Discord channel, and we'll maybe put up a live feed of Steve dying in a fit of coughing.
Yeah, we'll start live streaming me dying. But anyways, with that, I think let's go ahead and start breaking into the show topics for this week. We are going to be talking about some pretty hot button issues. I've talked about this, it's coming. I'm sorry, guys. I know I didn't have time. Now I have a lot of free time, and that's due to personal reasons. But TikToks are coming, I swear. But I've been hanging out on TikTok a lot because I'm a millennial and I have nothing better to do with my life. So on TikTok, one of the big discussions that's been happening has been this idea that Dungeons and Dragons, while being a tabletop RPG, is a different hobby than dedicated tabletop RPGs. Meaning that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have been pushing Dungeons and Dragons away from the rest of the genre and trying to isolate its fan base. And I understand both sides of the argument, but I do sort of see where the people on the side saying that Hasbro and Wizards is pushing Dungeons and Dragons away from the rest of the tabletop community. I do really see that. And I don't know what your opinion on this whole situation is there, Steve.
Well, I haven't followed the debate because I just don't do TikTok. I watch it occasionally with my wife, but she doesn't watch RPG related stuff. And
you're not a 20-something who's bored, so
no, it's been a long time since I've been a 20-something. But no, I get that, and there is kind of a definite divide in the RPG community between the, for lack of a better word, the D&D crowd and the people who play other things crowd. And I think you and I, part of the reason we started the show was because we were running into that wall a little bit, in that, well, okay, we've grumbled about D&D a bit on the show before, and there are some things in D&D that I don't like personally. and I'm more than happy to discuss some of those issues, be it on the air, on Discord, in private chat, whatever. I don't care. But I try to keep it focused more towards elements of design that I dislike and why I don't like them. And a lot of it, I should say, a lot of it is more that I feel like D&D is often misrepresented as being extremely beginner friendly, etc., and I don't feel that's the case, especially compared to other designs. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad game. I have and probably will again have a considerable amount of fun playing it, but I think that, let me back that up a second. There's also the fact that I am not all that into classic high fantasy, which is what Dungeons and Dragons does best, classic heroic high fantasy. That's just not where I want to play games most of the time, and that is what it does best. To do other things, I feel that there are other game systems mechanically that do that better. So that's why I want to play those other game systems. My biggest grumble really are the people, to a certain point, on both sides of this argument, who are trying to say that the other side is bad and that we shouldn't do it. I have no problem with people who want to play D&D and have fun doing it. What I kind of ruffles my feathers, if you will, is the people who, I don't want to play anything but D&D. Well, look, good for you, but all I'm asking in a lot of ways is, look, I'll play D&D with you for a while, but then can we play something else, next session, next campaign, whatever.
Yeah, I completely agree. I understand where again, I go back and forth. I understand where everybody's coming from on this, but in my mind, I do agree that okay, I'm going to get into it a little bit because I do agree that with the people that are saying that Hasbro and by extension Wizards, because at the end of the day, the thing you have to keep in mind is that Dungeons and Dragons is owned by Wizards of the Coast, which is a subsidiary company of Hasbro. Yes, the same people that make Monopoly, if you didn't know this, are the same people that make Dungeons and Dragons, and that's great. I mean, I think that's fantastic. We do need a big we need a big presence in the market, and that is what Dungeons and Dragons is. But at the same time, the people that play exclusively Dungeons and Dragons typically, and it's not uncommon to run into people that are willing to try other things, but a lot of people are not willing to try other games. That's where it comes into we had the whole episode of D&D isn't everything bagel. Well, D&D is great, but I don't want that all the time. And D&D does what it does fantastically. But at the same time, there's a lot of push from people going, yeah, but you can make D&D do this. Well, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that's where your base is. But why would I make D&D do fantasy space or fantasy future when I have something like Shadowrun or I have other games that do that just as well? Maybe not mechanically, I understand people have their qualms with Shadowrun and its mechanics, but what I'm getting at is that thematically and gameplay wise, there are games that do a lot of what you want to do in D&D. You want to tell an Eldritch horror story, Call of Cthulhu exists. Trail of Cthulhu exists. Anything in that Gumshoe engine is great for that. And it's not hard to learn.
Yeah. Gumshoe's a great investigative system.
Yeah, Gumshoe's a great investigative system. You want to do Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk Red is a fantastic Cyberpunk book. But what Dungeons and Dragons does is it does high fantasy. It does combat really well. I think Dungeons and Dragons combat, for what it is, if you look at it as like if you have minis and you're doing the whole tactical thing, Dungeons and Dragons combat's really good. It is. It's a really good combat system. It's slow at times, but it's slowed down by its players. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we addressed this in the Everything Bagel episode, but it's also, and specifically in combat, there are some of their choices in wording and so forth that make it confusing for new players. And the fact that there are a lot of people like you and I who have been playing these games for years, and we know what it means, even though what it says is confusing. So we're just, I'm going to do this with this action and that with that action, bang, bang, bang. And new people are sitting at the table and they're confused. And then they feel intimidated because they just watched the three other people at the table go through what they're going to do real fast, and they're still not sure what they can do.
Right.
That's more my issue with it necessarily than the system itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, that goes back to combat's really smooth, but players slow that down. And that's going to be any game. You know, I'm sure that in Mutants and Masterminds, we slowed down combat more than anybody who's been playing that game for a serious amount of time.
Yes, but we also had the luxury of playing that game with someone who knows it well enough to get hired to be part of the development team for it.
Right.
So he did a lot of the work on the front end that we could just ask a quick question and there we go.
Right. But I do think though, and I sort of talked about this a bit, but I feel like the marketing strategy is to push Dungeons and Dragons away from the rest of the D&D or the rest of the tabletop RPG community and hold it on its own pedestal. And that is a push not by the players, not by anybody who has any control really over it other than the actual marketing and creation department of that. I think they're really trying to push that game away from the rest of the community and be like, no. D&D is great. Only play D&D. And that's something we saw. I wasn't necessarily around for it, but I know because I'm a history nerd and I love this tabletop RPG stuff, I know from doing my own research that that's something we started to see in the late 80s, early 90s at the beginning of the bubble. I wouldn't even say bubble, at the beginning or silver age of RPGs, right?
Yeah, that well, the end of TSR slash, when Wizards initially bought D&D and the whole 3.5 RPG explosion.
Well, that, or even getting into the stuff like, you talk about GURPS, we've talked about Rifts, the very simulationist stuff where it's stay in our ecosystem. No, stay in our ecosystem. Stay in our ecosystem. We want you here. And that was a push back in that time of like the Silver Age when those games were starting to come up and these new games are coming out. Everybody wants you to stay in their ecosystem and keep buying our books and keep buying our books. And the thing of it is that D&D really wants you to keep buying their books, and that's great. I think they are putting out some really fantastic content, but at the same time, you have to recognize a pattern when you see it, at least in my mind. And I recognize a pattern of, hey, we're trying to isolate, we're trying to push away from not necessarily the rest of the community. I mean, they don't come to any of the conventions anymore, really.
Mm-hmm.
There are no official representations of Dungeons and Dragons at most of the conventions. Hasbro has really pushed for that. And that has, again, I blame Hasbro because we saw that change when Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast. This is not the Hasbro acquisition was a pretty recent thing. And by recent, I mean within the past decade or so.
Yeah, I don't know the date on that.
I don't have the exact date. I know that it was around the time of 5th edition, like the beginning of 5th edition, somewhere around there. That and don't hold me to that. Don't.
Actually, it's been longer than I thought.
How long has it been?
September of 99.
Really? Hasbro
Yep.
purchased. Okay, so then I'll say it this way. The push away has been started since I would say probably 10 years ago. How long has 5th edition been out? 7 years at this point?
I think it came out in 12 or 13.
Yeah, so 7 or 8 years.
The other thing, though, to also, I think when Hasbro initially bought Wizards, they were not buying it for D&D. They were buying
No.
it for Magic the Gathering, and at the time, Wizards also held the license to do the Pokemon card games.
Yeah, and I think that's why Hasbro purchased them, and then they lost the rights to the Pokemon card game, and that has been their own thing because Pokemon exploded, and Wizards, Magic is still a massive, massive market share. Magic, just like Dungeons and Dragons, Magic is arguably, the most popular card game. Like, if you don't play Magic consistently, if you've played card games, you've played Magic probably. You know what I mean? Or if you haven't, somebody's been trying to get you to play it. But I think in the past probably 10-ish years, Hasbro has really started to push and really push Dungeons and Dragons away from everything that it was, because even in 3.5, I don't believe now that you could have what effectively was Pathfinder come out with a 5th edition.
No, I agree with you there.
Where Pathfinder, when it came out, I don't, again, am not an authority on this, so please don't take my word as end all be all. But when Pathfinder came out, I always knew it as 3.75.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because 4th edition was coming out. People weren't happy with 4th edition, but they were happy with Pathfinder because it was 3.5 modified. And I don't believe that if a game like Pathfinder, where it would say be D&D 5e 0.5 or 0.25 was coming out, I think Hasbro would shut that down hard.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
You know what I just learned, literally as we're recording this?
What's that?
You know who owns Hasbro? The House of Mouse.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that part of that Disney? Because they were I want to say they were part of the Viacom acquisition. I don't know. I knew that sort of.
Yeah, I didn't
And
realize
that would
that.
explain. Well, I want to say, I'm not going to say that, because I wanted to say that I think that the Hasbro acquisition was part of that more recent push on Disney's end, but 14, yeah. So that would have been right at the start of that Disney push when Disney was buying everything, right at the beginning of that, right as Marvel was taken off.
Mm-hmm.
But again, goes back to, with it, even with Hasbro being a subsidiary of Disney, Disney does not let things like that slide. Disney is very locked down on their, we own the rights to this, and that is it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that even with changing the words, I don't think that you could get away with a Pathfinder system or a Pathfinder-like game with 5th edition.
I don't think that the market is there. I think, and this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but it's our show, so we'll do what we want. Pathfinder came about, in my opinion, and I don't have any real research to base this off other than just looking at the structure of the games. Pathfinder came out as a backlash against the change to 4th edition. The people who weren't happy with 4th edition, to my mind, it's very similar to the grunge explosion of the early to mid 90s, where it was a backlash against the hair metal of the late 80s.
Yes, but and I could be wrong. I'm pretty certain that Pathfinder technically premiered at the tail end of 3.5 when 4th edition was testing. I believe, and I'm not certain of this, I believe that 3.5 was the active edition when Pathfinder 1st edition came out. And the reason for that was because you got to remember, 4th edition and 3.5 were ending right as I don't want to say right as the internet was starting to take off, but at the very beginnings of the modern internet, we'll call it, right?
Sort of. I do know this. Paizo originally was a publishing company that had been doing a lot of basically subcontracting work for Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
They had been producing Dragon Magazine and so forth. And then I want to say it was with the closing of the 3.5 system, or as they were getting ready to do that, Paizo pulled that work from them. Or
I
not Paizo,
wouldn't put it past them.
Wizards pulled that work from them. And so Paizo said, well, you know what? We've already got this stuff. We're going to take the system, change it enough that we can rebrand it as our own. We already have all this material that we have been publishing. We're going to make a system based off of that all these people who have been buying Dragon Magazine, et cetera, and so on, they've already been, we know there's a market for this content, so we're going to make it, since the company who has been selling it decided they don't want to make it anymore.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I had heard through the grapevine somewhere that it came about because some people got their hands on 4th edition early and were like, "Ew, we got to hurry up and do something about this." I had heard that. I can't say that is a for certain thing, but I had heard that that was the push for that. But again, Hasbro, Wizards, D&D have all been sort of pushing away, and 4th edition started that push, pushing away from the. It wasn't until this most recent edition that they brought back the OGL, the Open Games license, where now you can license to make supplements for D&D.
Yeah.
And 4th edition was very bad about they did not have the OGL. It was very much it's single party only. And now we're getting back into a little bit of that third party stuff, but again, as far as that being supported, so the Open Games license exists, but as far as any official being like, let me put it this way. Here's a perfect analogy for this. I put up in our Discord in our Star Wars chat that the old Star Wars cartoons, including the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, is now on Disney Plus. Disney did not make a single stink about we're releasing these, we're putting these out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost the same thing as when third-party supplements come out for D&D, they don't get posted on the main, like, I follow Dungeons and Dragons on Twitter, I follow Dungeons and Dragons on Facebook, I follow Wizards of the Coast. That stuff does not get posted. Like, when there's a third-party supplement that's coming out that's pretty nice, they don't advertise it. They're only advertising their first-party products. They are allowing people to do it, but they're not pushing it. And that is something, yes, granted, OGL is what it is, but that is something that says to me, we're doing this as a courtesy, but not that much of a courtesy.
Yeah. Well, but going to rewind back a little bit to what you were talking about, how they're trying to position themselves and maybe sort of separate themselves positionally. I think you don't have to look any farther than the cover of the books, where blah, 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 world's greatest role-playing game.
Yeah, they have it plastered on top like Nerf.
I will say this, and I again, I don't want to necessarily bash what anyone else thinks is fun. I wholeheartedly disagree that Dungeons and Dragons is the world's greatest role-playing game. I don't actually know what is the world's greatest role-playing game. I have opinions, but that's my opinion. I will wholeheartedly agree that Dungeons and Dragons is the world's most popular role-playing game.
Yeah.
But we all know that popularity doesn't equal good.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem if they did want to change their slogan to the world's most popular RPG. But again, like you said, that doesn't equal good. But if you like Dungeons and Dragons and you like our podcast, fantastic. I love to hear that. I'd love to have you come into our Discord. Tell us why you like our podcast, because is it the tips and tricks or what is it? Because we're always pushing other games. And if you're a diehard, D&D only fan, I want to know that, because I want to know what I can do to help you. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm not out here, and I don't want this to come across this way. I'm not bashing anybody. I'm just making a point that I really feel that Hasbro is not supporting the community at large. Because if you are a Dungeons and Dragons fan, I can say with a bit of certainty that at a surface level, you do not, like, if you are a surface level Dungeons and Dragons fan, you probably do not know that there are other tabletop RPGs, because I have friends that are surface level Dungeons and Dragons fans that were like, there's other games,
Yeah, and that's, I mean, in my mind, that was one of the whole founding principles of the show, was not to say that Dungeons and Dragons is bad, but that, hey, look, there's a whole lot of other games to play in other worlds, other, other imagination spaces.
Yeah, settings, worlds, tone. It's just, I like Dungeons and Dragons, but at the same time, I can understand why I can understand why there are some people out there that are getting fed up with people that only like Dungeons and Dragons. I get that. I'm not there. I'm not. I will never fault you for playing a game you like. If you like that game, as long as it does not physically harm anybody else, cool. Hey, great. That's fantastic. I'm glad you like that game. But there are other games. There are other things out there. And not saying that, everybody's going to be a convert, but there's a lot of people that are like, I like Dungeons and Dragons, but I really like sci-fi, so I'm going to make a Dungeons and Dragons sci-fi game. Well, hey, cool. But let me point you in a direction of Fragged Cyberpunk, or let me point you in the direction of Shadowrun, or there's some really cool Genesis stuff coming out for like a cyberpunk, cyberpunk,
Shadow of the Beanstalk.
yeah, stuff with that, and independent stuff coming out, and you want that magic cyberpunk. Hey, that's cool. There's stuff. There's game.
There's everything out there.
And one of the arguments that I've heard is buy-in, and we had a whole discussion on buy-in, but one of the more recent arguments was like, oh, well, D&D's cheap. Is it though?
Baloney.
Yeah. Like I really argue, is D&D cheap? Because for $60 I can buy a whole game. I mean, like literally a whole game.
Yeah.
Versus $60 I can buy 1/3, or sort of.
Look, I haven't totaled up things, okay? But I would say, looking at my collection in cover price, and that's another discussion I wrote, I'll go down here in a second. But in cover price value, the only thing in my collection that may surpass the value of my 5th edition D&D books, which I do not own everything, nor do I ever intend to, is possibly my Rift's collection, most of which was bought before the turn of the millennium, if not all of it.
And that's another thing. There are great games out there that you can find used.
Yeah, I bought a lot of my Rift's books used back in the day.
We've shouted them out a bunch of times. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, seriously, go check out Game Masters in Pittsburgh area. They're awesome. Used games out,
Yeah.
like
half price books, even
half price books
stuff.
Fantastic. Check your LGS, your local game store. Sometimes they have stuff, sometimes. It's not always, sometimes. I'll tell you, I told you personally, and I don't know if this is a Western Pennsylvania thing. I don't know if they're a chain. I really don't know, nor do I care to learn. Ollie's. We have a store near us called Ollie's. They're sort of like a bargain bin type place. I found games at Ollie's on their bookshelves.
Yeah, they're a different kind of place, but yeah, they're wonderful for finding stuff.
Yeah, they're weird, but really cool. Hey, I found stuff there. And if your main place of shopping for books is Barnes & Noble, you're really only going to find a handful of things. You're going to find mostly Dungeons and Dragons. You're going to find a couple other things. You might find Pathfinder. You might find some of those Paizo games. You might find Edge Studio games, now former Fantasy Flight games. You might find them still marked as Fantasy Flight games. But, if you're cost-minded and you're like, oh man, D&D's really cheap, it's really not the cheapest game that you could get into. There are a ton of free games. My game of the week is pay what you want. Now, that doesn't mean it's free, but it is pay what you want to pay.
Yeah. You can download it for free, read it, go, ooh, I really like this. Go back in and
throw a couple bucks,
rebuy it, but pay the publisher for it. You just don't have to do it up front.
Yeah.
Are you done with this line of thought? Because I have a soapbox to whip out here for a second.
Oh, what's the brand on it?
Okay, and I don't know 100% if this is to be directed at the publishers or perhaps the online retail giant of which I'm about to speak. But I am rather infuriated with, and at this point I'm pointing the finger at WotC and Paizo, WotC being Wizards of the Coast for those not familiar with the abbreviation. If you go on Amazon, and I'm taking people's word for this on the Paizo books because I've not personally looked at them, but you can buy their books at a very, very steep discount over cover price on Amazon. I have a problem with this, and here's why. The core of the TTRPG hobby, the gaming hobby, is built around the local gaming store. That's where you used to go to find this stuff. That's where you met people. That's where a lot of people started playing, so on and so forth. There is absolutely no way on God's green earth that those stores can compete with the pricing that, and I'm willing to bet this is Paizo and Wizards of the Coast selling at a discount to Amazon for them to then be able to sell on, because there's no way you're talking prices in some cases below 50% of cover price.
Yeah.
There's no way on God's green earth that it's getting marked up that much in storefront retail. And I really, really have a problem with these mega corporations. Specifically, I'm pointing at Hasbro here, that are essentially, I'm going to say it, they're undercutting the core of the hobby that built them. And that pisses me off.
Yeah, no, that was the next place I was gonna go actually. Because Hasbro is not helping local game stores, and I know we do try to not, we try to avoid the massive gorilla in the room, but the fact of it is that COVID has put a hurt on a lot of local game stores. A lot of those local game stores are really hurting due to being, whether they had to be shut down or couldn't do online sales, because sometimes that's not feasible. You can't compete with free shipping. How do I compete with 2-day shipping?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Amazon has been selling D&D books, and that's part of why we really push to find games on drive-through, because drive-through does put a lot of the money back into the publisher's hands. It's part of why I push, if you have a local game store, if it's a little bit of a drive, go check it out. But, Hasbro is hurting these local businesses. The brick and mortars are really struggling because they don't want to support, like, Hasbro likes having their books on the shelf, but they don't want to support that. I heard this fact, and it sort of threw me for a loop. So Barnes and Noble has been almost as bad as Amazon has been, in that the majority of D&D book sales are through Barnes and Noble locations, because Barnes and Noble is selling it at Amazon prices. And that's not me advertising for Barnes and Noble and saying, oh, go buy there. No, I am willing and very willing to pay a little bit more to support a game store.
Yeah. And now, one thing I would like to point out, and I don't know that this is still the case, I would imagine it is, R. Talsorian, the publisher for Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red, which you've heard us talk about.
About a gajillion times.
Yes. They, with the release of Cyberpunk Red, they participate in a program, which is something that you should probably bring up to your local game store if you next time you go there. There's a program out there called Bits and Mortar. Bits as in, like megabits, whatever. What it is a program in which a lot of publishers will, if you buy the hardcover copy of the book or the print copy of the book, will also throw in a free PDF. Okay? Well, R. Talsorian, with the release of Cyberpunk Red, and I should say also, many of these places, these publishers, do this with online sales, even if you buy the book directly from them. R. Talsorian, with the release of Cyberpunk Red, while they participate in the Bits and Mortar program, do not include a free copy of the PDF if you order the hardcover directly from their website. They do, however, participate in the program through local game stores, which is exactly why I personally went and bought my copy of Cyberpunk Red at a local game store, the Game Masters that Steve just mentioned a little bit ago, because I got the free copy of the PDF. Now, here's the thing that I appreciate about this. That is the management at R. Talsorian saying, go support your local game stores. That is a publisher looking and saying, hey, these people, these little, independent stores all over the country and the world, that's what built our hobby into what it is. That is the core that if we lose that, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I've heard some people say, but what if you live somewhere where there isn't one? Well, look, I understand that. I appreciate that. I might know of a place where you can order it online and still do that, because it is effectively a local game store that's big enough they do some online sales. It's a wonderful place to go, as Steve mentioned, to look for used games too. It's a company called Noble Knight Games. Again, I don't know that they offer it. I'm just throwing them out there as a place to go look for things. But, I would say what we're talking about, this is more of a kind of an industry thing. Please, please, please go support your local game shops. Nothing, we're on the internet. We're on Discord. I'm on, I don't know how many damn Discord channels, Facebook groups, etc. But the heart of this hobby has always been the local game store. Support them. And you'll find a lot of times the people who actually own these shops, they're hardcore gaming nerds. You know, you and I, when we went up to this Game Master shop, which is an hour drive for us, well, for me, it's a little longer than that for you. We could have literally sat there and talked with the owner for, well, the rest of the day and longer had we not had other things to do, just talking about different games.
Yeah.
He just loves games. And it's, yeah.
So nice. I would love, we need to figure it out. Maybe when you get a new computer, we'll pack up some gear and go down there. I'd love to get him on the show.
Oh, that would be cool.
That'd be we would have like 5 episodes. Because it would be a 5-hour podcast that we would edit down to 5 episodes. Hey, there's a little bit of behind the scenes, folks. If you ever hear where we have multiple parts, guess what? That's because we went longer than an hour.
Yeah, I don't think we've actually done that yet, but
well, with the actual plays.
Well, yes, actual plays, but
also, how great was that MODOK family reunion actual play?
That is a blast. I love that.
I love
that.
It
Was
too.
So much fun to play. It was the first time I ever got to play Supers. Also, actually, and I think this was for you, and I know Jeff as well, who played Ant-Man, and I don't know how much experience Shane had with Roll20 prior to that, but we were all also learning Roll20 as we did that. So we're playing a new game
in a new system. Yeah, it's a fantastic, just phenomenal thing. So yeah, get out there, support your local game stores, and again, if you can't support a local game store, at least support the publishers through drive-through. Like,
yeah,
that's don't, if you can't afford new books, all right, fine. There is, like you had mentioned about buying used from that company that you just mentioned.
Noble Knight.
Noble Knight, that was it. I knew it was Knight something. My brain just refused.
And they will actually, you can mail them your used stuff if you want to sell it as well. I've not done anything with it, but I do know some other podcasters who have dealt with them in the past, and yeah, you can send them old stuff and they'll grade it and give you credit or whatever for it.
Noble Knight, or even if you absolutely have to, eBay. I've ordered stuff off eBay before for used games.
So I
I really, one thing that I don't want to tell you how to play your games, but one thing I will tell you is that please, if you're going to play games, support your local game store. I don't mean, if they have D&D books marked up to $100 a book, but if they're marked up to what the actual back of the book is listed as, feel free to support them, because they're getting hurt by companies like Amazon. And buy some dice while you're there, because that usually gives them a little bit more kickback than the books do.
Yeah, probably. They probably do make a little more profit on them.
Yeah, I just, get out there, support your local game stores. We really do want you folks out there to do that, because it is just a smart thing. It's a good thing to get into the habit of. And if you don't have a local game store, like Steve said, online retailers are great.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bash Amazon necessarily. I've bought stuff through there. We all have.
I don't have a problem per se, but it is at the same time, when it comes to RPGs, I'm more likely to buy a game through somebody like DriveThru.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I bought the Judge Dredd combo that I talked about the other day, or the other week. bought that, and that was, I bought that through DriveThru because I was like, well, A, I like Russ Morrissey, and B, I don't want to buy it through Amazon because I can't get as good of a deal, and I'd much rather support more of this, please. Anytime you look at something and go, more of this, please, make sure you're supporting who's putting that out.
Yeah.
And with that, I did you have anything else you wanted to get into? Because I think we're about to get into Game of the Week.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it is about time for Game of the Week. But to kind of answer the question you posed to kind of open things, I don't know if D&D is a separate thing from TTRPGs, but I don't think it should be.
No, I don't think it should be either. But at the same time, the other games feel like there's such a niche sometimes, and it's a shame. There's a ton of us out there that play them, but I think sometimes it feels like we're in this I wouldn't say elite, but we're in a very select group of people that play tabletop RPGs that
Mhm.
are not D&D. Not only D&D, I should say.
Yep. All right. I think it's time for Game of the Week, Steve.
Woo, game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
You want to go? I got one, but I don't want to tell you mine until you've told me yours.
Okay. Well, given that you told me that yours is pay what you want, I'm fairly confident that I haven't stolen yours because
Okay.
mine is not a pay what you want title.
Good.
But it does kind of tie back into a couple of things we were talking about earlier in this episode. My game of the week for this week is a title called Low Life 2090 from a publisher called Pickpocket Press. What this is an OSR cyberpunk kind of Shadowrun-esque game. It is a D20 based cyberpunk and sorcery set in 2090. It has elves and minotaurs and some of those races like that. It has magic. So it is, in a way, if you will, probably a little more of a Shadowrun take than a cyberpunk take. This is a 300-page book. Looking at the preview, they have a preview video on there that was pretty neat. They've got at least 2 free adventures available for it. They have a free GM screen inserts, character sheets on drive-through, Roll20 support, Foundry VTT support. Actually, they should have, they're saying, a 3rd adventure out possibly by the time this airs, according to the info on drive-through. And they intend to produce new adventures, they say, every other month going forward. So this is one of the books that is being hit by the price increase. Currently, as we speak, the PDF is $15. The current, as we record, price of the premium hardcover print on demand is $55. Obviously, by the time anyone out there listening hears this, that won't be the case. There is a note on the listing saying that they intend to try to do a standard color hardcover option, hopefully by the end of July, to make it a little more affordable. But yeah, I mean, like, I looked at the preview. The art looks very thematic. Something I might pick up because I just love the genre, even though I'm not the biggest D20 fan, but it just looks interesting. And that's, like I said, called Low Life 2090.
Cool. Hey, let me ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
Is that so? You're done with your game, right?
Yep.
All right. Do you like Roger Rabbit?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah, yeah, that movie.
Yeah, I've seen it a time or two.
Do you like Cyberpunk?
Yes.
What if, and hear me out here, what if there was a Cyberpunk Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
That could be entertaining at the very least.
I found a game called Toon Punk. That is TOONPUNK because I can hear you typing. And it is a cyberpunk Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Okay. You have my attention.
That's what I said. It is pay what you want. Their suggested retail price is $15. I think that's fair. It is a D10 based game. Seems like it's a little bit more aimed towards having actual like a tactical game, but it is set in a dark, humorous science fiction future where cartoons have come to life in the dystopian 24th century. The laws of our world and the madcap pseudo-realities of ink and paper have collided to create a world that is trapped between a complete nightmare and a complete joke. This sounds so good, dude.
Oh,
so good.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get this. It just seems like too much good imagination fodder.
It's like I saw the art and my brain went like my brain started going, oh, I want this immediately. And it is very tactical. So if you're not down for a tactical game, hey, I mean, it's not for everyone, but I'm sure you could, I don't know, maybe tear some of the tactical out of it and steal it for its setting.
Oh, the themes have to be just over the top hilarious.
Yeah, it's got really cool cover art. It seems like a really interesting game. It looks like it's got some pretty decent art in the book. again, core books, pay what you want, and 132 pages. It seems like a really fun, weird game, man. I like it. They advertise lightning quick character creation, building and running your own missions, encounters, and maps. It's very much a heist game. So if you like heists, that would be a cool one too. I am excited. That is a 100% in the bag, like in the cart, checking out now type thing.
Yeah, no, that looks amazingly wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, anybody who's listened to the podcast for any extended period of time understands that I am one of those people where that hits
Oh.
my fancy.
And they not only do they do offer the regular PDF is pay what you want, but they have what they call Toonpunk Pilot Episode, which is effectively a quick start that is
Free.
legit free.
Mhm.
Oh, that's even cooler.
Yeah, I check out Toonpunk because I honestly, that's a good. It's chocolate and peanut butter for me right now because like these are two great tastes that taste great together. When was the last time you thought about that one, Steve?
Oh, I don't know. I saw some Reese cups on the counter earlier today.
And with that, Steve's gonna go eat some Reese's cups. But you can find us on Discord at Me and Steve Talk RPG, or Me and Steve. What is our Discord?
I
Me
don't
and
know. The
Steve
link's in the show
RPGs.
notes.
You find us on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. You can check out our affiliate link in the show notes. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter at and RPGs, Facebook. We don't really use the Facebook, but if you want to go over there, it's there. Again, soon to be TikTok, which once I get some content made. But with that, I do want to remind you to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, folks.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Turned on the butt.
Turned on the butt. Bring the robot in. Anyway.